that we've talked in other videos about, whether or not to have eggs as part of your breakfast. So right now I'm just going to jump right into cooking a veggie omelet. I think, regardless of whether you have them or don't have them, finding ways to incorporate veggies into your breakfast is always a good idea. So for this, instead of, the typical ham and cheese someone might have in an omelet, we're going to do a quick saute of some onions, some bell peppers, and some mushrooms. So I want just enough oil to coat the pan here, and I am using a nonstick pan to allow myself to use less oil. And I want to mention the type of oil that I'm using as I start to saute my veggies here. So I'm not going to use everything that's here. You want, enough that you can still close up your omelet. So I'm using some neutral oil. I'm using a canola oil. A vegetable oil would be fine. I do use a lot of olive oil in cooking, but it does add a little bitterness. It has a strong flavor, and eggs are just so mild that it's a little overpowering. Certainly, most people would prefer to cook eggs with butter, and if you want to do that, by all means. I'm trying to show people ways to avoid, some of that added saturated fat. But one technique that I like that will give you that butter flavor without having so much is you can actually melt some oil half and half together with butter. When it's well blended, you can put it in the fridge. It will still be thin, but it will partly solidify. And then when you cook, it tastes, as long as you're not using olive oil and you're actually using a neutral oil, it will taste like that whole amount of fat is butter, but it will actually only be half butter. So you can cut that back by 50%. Right now I'm just going to use, completely heart-healthy oil. And if you wanted to skip it for the saute and do like a water or broth saute, that would be fine. I would encourage you to use a little bit at least with the egg, though it does, unless you have a brand new nonstick pan, it will tend to stick. With omelets, if you're using a spatula to flip, you also have a little bit more leeway with using less, but if you're making, say, a fried egg, then if you want to be able to actually flip it over in the pan, you do need something to lubricate the bottom of that so it will actually come off the pan and not stick to it. I'm just cooking this until the vegetables are a little softened. You can, if you like them totally soft, you can cook them for longer. I just, I like them still to have a little bit of a bite, so I'll leave them that way. I like a little bit of freshness there still. And the other thing to mention is if you're going to cook something to add to your omelet, you want to make sure to clean your pan in between cooking whatever you're sauteing and the eggs. A lot of people just take the vegetables out and then, go to put their eggs in, and the little bits of sugars and, solids that are left from those vegetables will actually make it brown really quickly and stick. So if you've had trouble with that in the past, that might be one of the reasons why. And I'm adding a little bit of salt. Of course, that's optional. I just like to season as I go. A little bit of fresh cracked black pepper. If you're confident with your saute skills, you can also just toss it. I think I'm good here, so I'm going to transfer this to a plate, and then we'll go ahead and show you the egg cooking portion of the omelet. So now I'm going to scramble my eggs. So I'll talk a bit about scrambled eggs and about omelets. And so first, I'm just going to crack my egg. I'm going to crack it on a flat surface, and then use the little divot that cracking on the flat surface created to break the egg, pull it apart, and put it into a bowl. So if you're having, a 2-egg omelet, I'd recommend not having it every day, as we talked about in the, intro to the session on cooking eggs. And you can also make a bigger one and share it between people if you want to do that. It is easier to cook it when you have at least a couple, if not more. And you can whip it together with a fork or a whisk. I'll use a whisk. I'm going to season with a pinch of salt and pepper. Some people will say they like the texture of scrambled eggs better if they salt and then let it sit for a while. You can always experiment with that and see if you like that. The goal is just really to get it well mixed together. Some people whip it for a long time to whip more air into it if that's you know, if that creates a texture you like, then that's the right way. And, you know, if you don't notice any difference, then you can stop more quickly, and that's the right way. It's really however you like it. The trick with scrambled eggs or omelets, which are, you know, really just two ways of making the same thing, are that you just don't want to heat the pan too high. The goal is really to minimize the browning of the egg. And since I'm not adding any cheese to the middle to bind everything together, then I really want to leave a little bit of creaminess in the middle, so I don't want to cook it too quickly. And then I'll use that when I fold it over to bind my egg together. I'm just adding a little more oil to the pan. And it's nice to have a rubber spatula handy for this as well. So I like when I add my eggs for an omelet to the pan to not have a lot of sizzle, because that usually means it's a little too hot and you're going to get more browning than you would like. So, and if you have a smaller pan to make an omelet, then, you know, I do like to use a pan that, you know, when you have the eggs in there, that they're going to cover the pan. So I may just, you know, kind of shift this to one side if I'm making fewer eggs. I recommend just using whichever pan sticks the least. So yeah, we're gonna make ours this shape. You just want something that's kind of symmetrical, so when you fold it over, it's going to look nice and be, you know, something you can cut into. And so what I'm waiting for is just the bottom to heat enough that when I add the vegetables, they're not going to sink through to the bottom of the pan. I really want them to be in the omelet, so that's what I'm aiming for. And you can kind of shift it back and forth. You'll notice that some parts might cook quicker than others. Redirect the liquidy part of the egg to where you need it to go so it's evenly cooked. Okay, and the bottom sealer, I'm just, again, like I mentioned, my burner gets a little too hot, so I'm going to turn it off for a second because I don't want the cooking to go too quick. And I'm going to add the vegetables to half of it. And if they get off to the side, that's okay. You can put them back in. And again, since we're not putting, you know, gobs of cheese to hold this together, you could certainly put a little bit in there, you know, a little bit if that's something that you eat, that would be fine. I just want to show you that there are ways to make it without having lots of cheese if you prefer not to have it, or if it's something that you're not having for dietary reasons, or it's not in the fridge because you haven't went to the grocery store to get any, whatever the case may be. Get my heat going again a little bit here. All right, and then what we want to do is just loosen that up from the pan, and while there's still some liquid there, to flip that over, and that, again, that creaminess there is going to finish cooking, and that's going to just hold everything together, so it's not going to fall apart when we remove it from the pan. And if you wanted a beautiful, you know, long omelet, then you just have to use twice as many eggs in this pan, or use a smaller pan. All right, so we're just going to cook it on low heat another 30 seconds or so, and then I'll flip it over if you want to finish cooking it on the other side. If you're someone that really likes a nice creamy scrambled egg, it will actually probably cook through enough for you if you have the heat low enough that you might be able to get by without flipping it. And if you have a silicone spatula or another high heat spatula that is not metal, you can use it in the nonstick pan. You want to avoid metal utensils in your nonstick pan, otherwise you'll scratch it up and it will, turn it into garbage. You'll have to throw it away because everything will stick to it. So we'll go ahead and flip that over. So you can either try and flip it over with this. I'll do that because I know a lot of people do that at home. You can also just flip like you're going to saute and flip it over. There we go. There we go. We got a little browning, but not too much. And that's, I think that's perfectly okay. All right. Just gonna give it about 10 seconds or so, turn the heat off, and then we'll slide that onto the plate. Also cut into it so you can see those nice colors inside as well. Slide our omelet onto the plate there. It's kind of nice, especially if you have, a different shape. You can kind of work with what shape you have, and it looks like we can create two nice triangle pieces. And so if you're trying to just aim for one egg serving at breakfast, then you also, have your two portions here. You can see there's some, that green broccoli, the red bell peppers, and the mushrooms and the onion kind of blend in, but this smells so tasty. If you had this with some whole grain toast, some fresh fruit, it would, really be a great way to incorporate whole grains, plenty of produce into your breakfast, and protein source is going to be a lot better for you than, say, having, your processed meats like bacon and sausage for breakfast.